Hi, I'm Dr. Carmen Celestini.
And I'm Kyle Hickey, and this is the premiere episode of God's Angry Men. Thank you for joining us. Now, you might be wondering, what is God's Angry Men? Where does that title come from? And what exactly will this podcast be about? Those are questions I had when Carmen and I first started talking about doing this and came up with this title. So I'm going to let Carmen explain where this title comes from, what's the background of it, and what it all means.
When I was doing the research for my dissertation, I studied the John Birch Society, which was a group that even today in scholarship, everyone looks at and says, oh, they were kooky, they were conspiracy theorists and really didn't do anything. But the truth is that they created a very powerful religio-political group that got Barry Goldwater his nomination in 1964. What people don't realize is that they were very religious. Not necessarily themselves, but they use the hierarchy of religion and religious language and beliefs to mobilize people in this political movement. So when it began, Robert Welsh created a magazine called One Man's Opinion. And in that magazine, he would send out stuff that was not particularly conspiracy based, but it was about economics and politics. And it was geared to only rich corporate people, people in the upper middle class and above. And what he had was a group that convened over him that was sort of like his editorial board, his national council. But they were comprised of ex-military, media people, ex-politicians, people who were wealthy, who led corporations. And he referred to them as God's angry men. And those men eventually became the National Council for the John Birch Society as well. But it was interesting that it involved a lot of people who were media based. Much like then it was radio personalities who were right wing, but much like we see today with Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and other individuals, it just seems so apropos for what we're seeing happening in 2024, 2025. So we wanted to look at God's angry men across the globe and how they're affecting politics, using fear, conspiracy, religion, and using their places of power and their wealth to mobilize people for the political ends they want.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems like history almost repeats itself. You have one group, one party, one politician or major figure use in today's society, social media, for example, to influence people to vote a certain way to help shape the society they want. Damn everyone else's opinion, damn everyone else's vote. This is what I want, and here's how I'm going to get it. Expand your influence, get more people to agree with you. And that is what we're seeing happen in Canada, in the US. If we look at the US election, Donald Trump won handedly, defeating Kamala Harris. And he was able to do something that I think a lot of people were either afraid could happen or in complete denial could happen. And that was make the impossible comeback.
Yeah.
He went from being this disgraced ex-president who was impeached twice, never convicted, but impeached twice,
Going into the White House as a felon.
going into the White House as a felon, but in a stronger position now than he was back in 2016 because 2016 no one knew what to expect. No one knew what he was going to do. Yes, he said things during the campaign, but everyone kept saying, "Oh, the office will humble him. He'll be brought closer to reality once he sits in the Oval Office and has his advisors around." We all know now that did not happen.
No, but that's the
Um,
last time.
but there was opposition to him, a very strong opposition to him almost immediately. We don't see that right now. What we see is the Democrats in a complete disarray. There's no unifying leader for that party. A lot of finger pointing, but no one's saying, okay, here's what we have to do for the next 2 to 4 years to counter him. You have Donald Trump, Republicans, and MAGA steamrolling their way into the White House in a few short days, heavily influenced by people like Elon Musk, who has spent countless dollars to bring forth this vision of America that he wants. And not just in America, we're seeing him try to extend that influence into Canada, into the UK, into France. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about these ideas, with the John Birch Society, one of the things that they wanted to do, not just to get Goldwater his position, they actually saw it more of a future movement, a much bigger picture, was that they wanted to look at how do we get people who are right wing to get a following. So what they would do, or what they proposed to do, was to say that if I was somebody who had shared opinions, that rich people would start putting me on their broadcasts. They would start engaging with me, start having conversations with me until I started getting a following, and then I could get elected, with the ultimate goal of having the very far right, the very free enterprise, the, at that point in time, anti-communist, which still in this time anti-communist. Um, but it really was to get them to be in positions of power of the GOP, and have the moderates in the GOP have to come to them on bended knee and just basically take over. Now, that was something they created called the Prospect Plan, but I don't know if it actually came to fruition. But sometimes when you look at the landscape, yes, it has. But this media has had such an impact globally. And I think that is an important conversation for us to have. So, part of the premise of this podcast that we created was that Kyle and I became friends, and we share a incredible addiction to politics and to the news and to engaging with that. Poor Kyle. Everyone feel very bad for Kyle. My area of research is looking at extremism, hate, conspiracy theories, politics, and religion, and how all of those things come together and can impact politics. So Kyle has been introduced, because this is how I show my love, is to conspiracy theories and all of the things that are on my algorithm on social media, messing up his algorithm. But he
Scary
was
place.
awesome.
And for me, I'm just a happy connoisseur of all things politics. I love politics. I love how it influences culture and society, how it defines what we do and how we do it, and in the little ways too that you don't often think about. I mean, a simple act of uh, going to one store, for example, over another can be political in some circumstances, or supporting, I'm going to go see this method of entertainment versus that one. I mean, going to the theater, maybe that's
Yep.
considered a little highbrow, that's a little bit liberal, a little bit of elite.
Elitist.
Go to a movie that's more everyday,
But
it's
what movie
sides.
are you seeing?
See, there we go. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Um, but those are the kind of conversations I love. Those little details that you don't think about. And also trying to see, is there anything left of a middle ground? It seems that every day Americans, Canadians, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you are being pushed into separate camps, right, left, conservative, liberal, or whatever name you want to give it. And if you try to venture outside that camp and try to say, hey, but they have a good idea over there. Maybe we don't agree with everything they say, but there's a few. Nope, stop talking.
Yep, absolutely. And we've
Out
lost that
comes the cane
ability.
and you're pulled off the stage.
Well, and that is part of the impetus for us doing this. Kyle and I, in our friendship, have spent many hours debating. We agree on some things, we heartily disagree on other things, but we will talk about it forever. If something happens, we will text each other back and forth. And when something happens, everyone who knows us texts us and goes, "What does that mean? What is this doing?" Or, "I heard about this conspiracy," or, "Oh my God, what just happened at the White House?" So, what we thought at first was we would share it with our friends and just try to, it's kind of like if 1,000 people ask you a question, post it, and then they can read it and you don't have to say it 1,000 times. But we wanted to share it to a larger audience. I know that my students have numerous times asked me to do a conspiracy theory, a podcast about conspiracy theories and what was happening, because they get all of their news from social media and the things that are happening. So they will, to this day, not even be my students anymore and still send me questions. So we think that there are enough people who are absolutely curious about things they don't know anything about. And I'm not saying that we know everything, but Kyle brings a very interesting sort of like amazing knowledge about politics and strategy and how those things work. I bring all of the weird, kind of crazy stuff and the anger and the hate
Crazy but lovable.
and all the things that are theoretical to all of this. And what that actually creates is a great conversation. So we want everyone to be involved in our conversation. We will ramble. just so we're clear, as my students call it, I go off on my trajectories and then no one really or tangents and no one really knows where I'm going, but they're usually pretty funny.
And I mean, that, and I also think, let's go back to being able to have a conversation. That has become a lost art form, I think. That middle ground I was talking about, it's a barren wasteland right now. If there's anybody left in it, God bless you. It's a lonely place. But I want to change that. I want to help bring that conversation back where, you know what? There are good people on both sides of the argument who do have, I know you're going to laugh
I'm
at
not
that.
totally laughing at you. Sorry, go ahead.
We'll explain why in a moment she laughed at that. But there are people who are good on both sides who do have lots to bring to the table, who, we don't agree on everything, but let's sit together, cobble together a plan, and maybe we can walk away saying, hey, I learned something about that person. I learned something about that position. And let's just be civil about it. It's
Absolutely.
become so vile and toxic in Washington, in Parliament Hill, in the dark corners of the internet, on Twitter, which is now X, on Facebook, on Instagram. You really can't go anywhere and not get attacked for having an opinion,
Unless it
uh,
matches everyone else's
unless it
opinion.
matches everyone else's. And the reason why, you laughed at that a second ago was back in 2017 in Charleston, if people will remember, there was
Charlottesville.
Charlottesville, my mistake, sorry.
We work well
Charlottesville.
together.
Close enough. So Charlottesville, there was the white nationalist group of men that were walking through the streets.
At the Unite the Right rally.
Unite the Right rally, thank you. Holding up the tiki torches, a great little torch to have. Kind of laughable now, but the symbol was horrible. They were promoting racism. They were promoting something that was vile and despicable. And at the time, then and soon to be again, President Trump came out after much urging by his
Wait, I
supporters.
need to add one more thing. Don't forget, one of the white nationalists did run over a woman, one of the
Mm,
protesters on the other side had her
true,
higher,
true.
and he killed her. And he is a well-known white nationalist. And they were chanting, "You will not replace us," which is a white nationalist slogan. And Donald Trump, when being asked about that, said that there were good people on both sides of the discussion. That really raised a lot of problems because a lot of people were like, what are the good people on the white nationalist side? Where
Yeah,
are the good people there? And I think that is part of the problem is why the middle ground is gone is because they're stereotypes, right? As much as everyone says, oh, I'm not into identity politics and identity politics are the worst, that's who we've become. If I was a Trump supporter, all of the stereotypes that you would attach to that, regardless if we were really good friends, were not nice.
I'm thinking if the stereotype of a Trump supporter or Republican or conservative is you have this white Christian male or female who is probably well off to some degree, or who is not so well off because they live in the middle of nowhere and they have farmland and things of that nature. Good folk who just want to live their life and support their family, but are looked down upon by society. They're not among the elite, so to
Yeah.
speak.
And if you think about the opposite of that, I know as somebody who is on the news a lot talking about media,
Mhm.
that one of the things that people were saying to me were like, I like to be a little eccentric and a little crazy. And they're like, you can't color your hair a color that's, blue or something, because then you become that stereotype of what the right wing automatically presumes who they are. As a woman, as a feminist, as somebody who's in the woke or on the left, you have a stereotype of them of being sad and screaming and angry and they look a certain way and
Mhm.
they act a certain way. And so we're not actually talking about policies. We're not actually talking about how to progress society. All we're talking about is why I hate you and
That's
what are
it.
the things that I want to stereotype about you and what are the things that are just horrible about you and your friends.
Exactly. Again, gone is any conversation that leads to progress, to lead to any sort of, all right, here's an idea or a bill for Parliament or the Congress to say, all right, no one gets everything they want, but at least we can all walk away somewhat happy knowing that the basis of what we need are done. No, it's why am I against you? For XYZ reason, why I hate you, XYZ reason, why you're wrong, XYZ
And
reason.
why I can make a policy to take away your rights or
That's
to
right.
harm you because I envision you as my enemy, not as a personal enemy, but my nation's enemy or the people who politically understand me's enemy.
Well, and it seems to be, again, when I go back to that whole term of history repeating itself, you've had leaders in the past going back, decades who used those types of arguments to their advantage. You had McCarthy in the US during the Red Scare. He
Absolutely.
labeled many, many people as a communist. If you landed on his list, your career was effectively done in whatever industry you were in. You go back to the 1940s and World War II, you had people in Germany. I mean, what Hitler did and Goebbels did is they brandished this entire society of people um, as horrible as
Less than
second
human.
class, less than
Less than human.
human, as filth, which was a horrible thing, but it worked. It made people who supported him and supported his policies and his Reich and all that other garbage look at Jewish people as something less than, and look what happened.
Validated the violence. It validated what happened. And we see the same thing happening here. I mean, there's just so much similarity. So looking back to World War II, Goebbels realized that most people in Germany couldn't afford radios. So
Hmm.
they weren't actually getting the messages and the propaganda and the hate and the cruelty that they were trying to spread in their message. So he actually had radios made that were super, super cheap so that way the message could go out to people and to create this fear, to create this hate, and to create at the same time this nationalism for who they were as a people. Well, if we look at 2024, we see Elon Musk doing the same thing. He bought the means of communication, which was sort of the public square where everyone came and had their opinions. And it was never idyllic. It was never the perfect little
No,
place. I've always studied my white nationalists on Twitter, even when it was Twitter. But now it is only his message, right? He's controlling the message and using his money, using his fame. And the best example, besides looking at Donald Trump, the last week and a half, Elon Musk has been promoting this idea about groomer gangs in England
hmm
and demanding that the Prime Minister of England step down. Now, what that is this idea that 10 years ago in a city, I believe called Rotterdam, which I could be saying wrong, and if I am, I'm really sorry. But they had these South Asian men who were grooming young girls, and it was pedophilia, and it was, gang sex. It was a very horrible situation. But let's look at that idea that it was 10 years ago.
yes.
And the Prime Minister of England at that point in time was sort of like the Crown Attorney or the DA or the General Attorney of the country and was going after these gangs. So, in a legal position, he was convicting them, he was conducting all of the investigations, he was doing all of these things. Now, in that one city, it was convicted, but they did investigate other cities. But that was 10 years ago. Now, all of a sudden, Elon Musk is sharing this message that the Prime Minister of England had this happen under his watch, that he didn't do anything, and that they're not having investigations, that these groomer gangs are still happening. It was 10 years ago, it wasn't last week. And it fits this narrative of racism, of lesser than for those who are immigrants, because it matches this larger conspiracy theory of the Great Replacement, that the Western civilization and white people will be replaced by immigrants and Western civilization will collapse. Um, but that's a narrative he's sharing right now, which is having a significant impact. When you look at his followers, people I know in America are retweeting about this horrible thing because who would want to see that happen, right?
Well, it's
You're going to be up
horrible.
in your arms and angry, but it was 10 years ago, which is not part of the
And
conversation.
what it seems to be making, what it seems to be causing, sorry, is that now you're angry at immigrants. Now you're attacking immigrants. You're going after politicians who support immigrants. You're going after people and organizations and groups that advocate for immigrants. One of the things you're seeing too in Canada, in America, UK, probably parts of Europe, is this anti-immigrant
Absolutely.
stance that's really starting to take hold. And the fact of the matter is, a country like Canada, we need immigration. Our economy is built on having people come here and performing tasks that contribute to our economy. Our birth rate is extremely low compared to what it used to be. It's not growing at a pace that will sustain our economy. However, what we're seeing though is immigration is coming from predominantly certain parts of the world. And as a result, when you start looking outside, in communities that are not used to seeing people who don't look like them, it's coming across as how many people are we bringing in? Why are we bringing these people in? And then you have the conservatives, you have people who are against immigration saying, well, our country's changing, our values are changing,
Our
our
culture is changing.
culture is changing. Instead of being this mosaic, it's starting to become one block.
Absolutely. And they're attacking that and saying, all of the bad things in society right now, we're not going to blame it on the government. We're not going to blame it on our policies. We're not going to blame it on the fact that we don't have
Mhm.
a social welfare, but we're going to blame it on the immigrants, right? They're the cause of
Of
everything.
course.
And to that, when people claim and say, that's racist. I mean, it's absolutely racist. When people say that, the response from the government is interesting to me. Now, yes, I did. I watched Pierre Polyev on Jordan Peterson's podcast. I watched the whole entire thing. And one of the things that they discussed was that in Canada, there was no racism until a couple decades ago, and that we imported it in from other countries, and that it was caused by wokeism, and it was caused by this stuff. Now, first of all, Canada is multicultural. I'm an older person, and it's always been multicultural in Canada. And it has always been this amazing group of human beings
Mhm.
who've come together and we all share things. But we are not perfect. There is racism in
Of
Canada. I
course.
study white nationalists for a reason in Canada because they exist and have for many, many decades. This is not something we imported. It's not because of wokeism. But when you think about that statement, that takes away the accountability for what his party is saying about immigration, or what the People's Party of Canada is saying about immigration, or what average person sitting at their dining room table griping because they've watched 3,000 videos on Instagram all saying that, it's an invasion, it's something else. It's a justification because, well, this is new because of wokeism and because of this, and that's why I'm validated for
Well,
feeling the way I
to
feel.
touch on that too, and I find maybe I'm wrong here, maybe I'm wrong here. You can tell me if I am.
I'd love to do
And you do.
that.
The way people are influenced today, social media, for example, that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, at least not in the state it is today. The way people consume their information and news has changed dramatically. I mean,
Absolutely.
gone are the days of the family gathering around the TV at 6 o'clock or 11 o'clock to watch the evening news with Lloyd Robertson or Walter Cronkite in the States. I mean, those
Hmm.
days are gone for the most part. We talked about this during the presidential election. There was a time when a journalist like Leslie Stahl of CBS News and 60 Minutes would have a presidential candidate come on to the show, have an interview, and everyone would watch just to hear what they have to say to get the answers to the questions of the day. Now that's gone. And part of that is because, one, the candidates aren't going on those shows because the audiences they're trying to influence are not there anymore.
No.
They have gone to people like Joe Rogan, who has the most popular and influential podcast on the air, so to speak. I don't know, was air or
On
whatever,
Spotify. Let's go Spotify.
whatever,
Let's just call it
on the
that.
Wi-Fi. He has the most influential show, though. Everyone falls to him in comparison. He has the most influential show. Donald Trump went to Joe Rogan during the election, had an interview that was watched or listened to by millions. Kamala Harris did not do that. I think she appeared on a handful of podcasts, maybe,
Yeah, but
but
isn't there some conversation about that she wasn't actually invited to be on the Joe
Uh,
Rogan?
I've read a few articles where they couldn't agree on a timing or a format, and I mean, that's fine. They can rehash that all they want. It doesn't change the fact that she lost.
Yeah.
But it goes to show you Donald Trump dropped everything essentially and said, okay, we're going on that show. Or maybe the show dropped everything and said, we'll make it work for him. Either way, he was on the show. She was not. He won. I'm not saying it's the only reason why he won, because it isn't, but who listens to that show? Who
Young white
watches that
men.
show?
Young white
Young
men.
white men. Young white men, but not just young white men. You've noticed too, if you look at the voting trends in the US, you had young Hispanic men
Absolutely.
who absolutely backed Trump. You had a lot of younger people who traditionally do not vote uh, conservative vote that way because the one thing Trump was doing that Kamala Harris wasn't, giving them a place.
Absolutely.
How many years have white young men been told, you don't have a place in society. Not those exact words, but
It's more of
okay,
a feeling.
more of a feeling. You can't do this, you can't say that, you can't act like this, you can't be that, all because you're trying to make things more inclusive. And being inclusive is important. I'm not trying to take away from that. But by doing that, you've alienated some people. Being the party of everyone means you are going to alienate someone one way or another.
Yeah, but I think it's a little bit larger than that as well.
Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure.
I think that first of all, we're in a situation where so many people who are involved in these kind of things are conspiratorial or at
Of
least
course.
distrusting of society, right? For conspiracy theories to take over, there has to be distrust in the institutions of society. Biggest one being media, right?
Mhm.
Ever since Donald Trump started, he
Fake
wasn't the
news.
first one to do it with his fake news. He was not the first one to do it. But that idea is really important because when you become away from actual news sources that have editors, who have lawyers, who have all of these mechanisms in place to ensure the truth is out there and the means to apologize when it was in or is incorrect,
Retract the story.
retract the story. But now most news doesn't come from those individuals,
Hmm.
right? They come from us, people who are creating podcasts, who are interpreting the news. But when you interpret the news, you do it through your own worldview, right? So if we or anyone becomes a position of trust, which Joe Rogan has, interestingly enough, then that's where you get your news and that's where you get it from. We also have to realize that Gen Z, this research and surveys and stats are showing that young women from Gen Z are actually very optimistic about the future. They actually feel, or women feel that there's a position for them, that they could have a career, that they could have all of these things. The thing they're most angry about are the rights that are being taken away from them. And not just in America with Roe v. Wade, but also in Canada, discussions that are out there about women's rights as well, LGBTQ, 2SA rights. All of these rights that or equalities being taken away from them are the fear. So a party saying we offer you this protection is something that they need. On the other side, we have young men who are going, I'm not going to get a job. Everybody else seems to have more rights than I have. I'm a victim to
Mhm.
all of these things. And then they have someone who goes, well, it's because you're emasculated. It's because you've been feminized. We need to give a more muscular, manly kind of thing for you to engage with. And that makes sense because what they're doing now doesn't feel good.
But and again, going back toward history, that almost plays up to when was the last time the Republicans had their great hurrah of being the party in charge? I mean, a real run at it. Think the Reagan years, the
Reagan, yeah,
1980s.
absolutely.
How many shows, movies, music that came out, and you had these patriotic, strongmen, action flicks, TV shows. I mean, the influences were there for that. People were proud to be this American guy who fought for rights, fought for freedom. Of course, it's fiction, it's a movie, it's a show,
Absolutely.
but it was something that influenced society to such a degree. And then you notice after the 80s and 90s, things changed. That kind of view took a different turn. You had 9/11, you had the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and all of a sudden, being patriotic, but having that type of patriotism didn't line up anymore.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. And one is because while Reagan was in power, the thing that people don't remember or people don't think about or the media really didn't talk about was that was the AIDS epidemic,
Hmm.
right? And we had a lot of people who were protesting. We had ACT UP, we had the quilt, we had all of these things where people were going, I am in love with this individual and they're dying from AIDS. No one is helping them. And I can't even be in the same room with them when they die because we can't be married and I can't be their partner and I can't be seen as close family. And so there was a huge movement that was happening there that was so important. And at the same time, it was also an era where women were suddenly being like, well, I can be a boss, but I also had to be like superwoman, right? They were pushing this idea that we could have it all. And I'm not saying that women can't have it all because we can, because I try to have as much as I can and work too much. But there wasn't any responsibility really placed on men in that discussion, right?
Mhm.
Women were seen as superheroes leading corporations and going home and, feeding 14 babies and cleaning the house while, her husband was still having scotch and hanging out with his friends and smoking a
The good
cigar.
old boys in the smoke-filled rooms.
Actually, and so then when we start thinking about the 1990s, when 9/11, or leading up to that, and once 9/11 happened, and in fact, research has shown that 9/11, when the airplanes hit and the terrorist act happened, prior to that moment, women were 50% of the op-eds in the New York Times and other organizations of news. When 9/11 happened, that was reduced to one or two women who were actually writing that. All of the media in America started presenting women who were the wives of the people who had died in the towers, ones who were pregnant, and how these ideas of family were so important. And then they started having things about women not wanting to work and wanting a man to look after them and change that dynamic
Doesn't
as
that
well.
almost have, throwbacks or callings to, again, 1940s, the war widows,
Absolutely.
Johnny's gone off to war. He's unfortunately died over in Europe.
So
I'm
these are our
pregnant with his
heroes.
son.
Yeah.
That they're the heroes. They're
They're the heroes
heroes.
now, not the women who were running the factories or engaged in all of these things, but the ones who were the helpless ones, right? So this narrative is really important. We saw that happening in the 90s or in 2001 after 9/11. We also see that with the trad wives right now, right? This idea of I don't want to work. Who decided I had to work? I just want someone to look after me. And that was the idea. All of the magazines were changing to marriage and women wanting to do these things to stop being powerful positions, and that masculinity was so incredibly
But
important.
see, and that's the thing too. Again, going back to you can have it all. What we're starting to see is, again, going back into separate corners, you're either a woman who wants to have that career, have that successful life, and being able to choose how she lives it. And then you've got the women who are saying, oh, no, 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 or people, sorry, who are saying, no, women should be, at home having the babies, raising the family, think, you know,
But that's
Leave
what
it to
feminists,
Beaver,
right?
pearl necklace and pie on the windowsill while the boys are out in the yard and husband's at work, black and white nostalgia. But that's not society. That's not realistic
It's not
anymore.
realistic. I mean, it's realistic in a feminist idea that we can choose
Yes,
to do whatever the hell we
the
want to
the
do, the
choice should
life.
always be
The
there.
choice should exist. But economically, unless you are very wealthy, how do you have an income in a household with children and a house and a white picket fence with one income?
Debt to your eyeballs. That's what you have.
So there is this, I mean, we talked about this in the past, he and I, about this idea of nostalgia, right? That
Mhm.
things were better back then. But nostalgia is spoken by people who weren't alive during
Oh,
that
of
time
course.
period. And so what it really is a criticism of today. It's a critique of what we see now. So this fear of losing economics, this fear of not having the American dream or the Canadian dream, however that might be defined for you and your group, and also, this loss of empowerment is so incredibly important. One of the strongest motivators is fear. And if young men, regardless of white, Hispanic, feel that there is no future for them, then they are absolutely going to fight back to get what they think they lost. And so that's where we're seeing this masculinization
Well,
happening.
think back to when Ronald Reagan was running for president against Jimmy Carter. Um, he said in that campaign, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And that has been an argument
Absolutely.
that every politician in the US, in Canada, the UK, you name it, will ask in some form or another. Are you better off today than you were when the other guy took over? And if the answer to that question is no,
Then vote for
then
me.
vote for me, basically. Kick him out, vote for me. We're seeing that now in Canada with Justin Trudeau, who's resigning effectively in disgrace. I
Yeah.
mean, he led his party in 2015 from obscurity, third party, sorry, uh, which they have never been in before. Soon to be back into it, I'm sure. Led from that, came back to a very strong majority, held that for what, 4 years, went to minority,
And now we're here.
called another snap election during the pandemic, thinking maybe I can turn the table and get back to a majority. Didn't work out. And now we're here, and you see public sentiment, polls, etc., saying he will, if he hadn't resigned, sorry, would have faced certain defeat. Liberals are still on the verge of certain defeat. Pierre Poilievre is trying to be Trump North, if you will, Trump Canada.
You're much nicer than I am.
Oh, I'm serious. You probably have a much different view than I do, and you're probably right because you're more in tune to that than I am. But I mean,
Oh, I meant the name calling.
oh, the name calling. Okay. Well, I'm trying to be nice here because I did say we want to have that middle ground, and saying "listen here, mother," whatever, is not going to
It's gonna happen.
bring us there. We'll have an after hours edition of this show where that will
Well,
happen.
we'll have cocktails and you'll hear that. But I think that
Cocktails and conspiracies.
cocktails and conspiracies with Kyle and Carmen.
But sorry, but you were gonna say something.
But when we think about that, okay, so a little bit of a tangent. But when we think about
There we
Biden,
go.
if we think about the rate of inflation in America and the rate of employment and all of the things that are wonderful in America right now,
Mhm.
no one talks about that because the right has the power of the media and the voice on social media denigrating absolutely everything that Biden did. And I hope in the future that historians will look back and be like, oh, like this is like I think it's like something the lowest unemployment rate in like 50 years or something like that. And so he's doing good or was doing good. Now, when we look at Justin Trudeau as well, we're seeing that we have one of the higher returns after COVID for our economy. And all of these things are good that are happening, but no one is talking about that because during the convoys, we had fuck Trudeau everywhere. We have all of these conspiracy theories attached to him about the Great Reset, all of these ideas that he's Fidel Castro's illegitimate son and communism and socialism. And we have people who are in positions of power regurgitating that.
Mhm.
And, we don't have politicians who are adults. Pierre Poilievre last week on his X account put out a video about the Liberal Party, calling them wackos, with wacko in economics, wacko wokeism, wacko.
Mhm.
And so, are you a child like that? He's calling, what's his name, Carney? The
Mark Carney.
Mark Carney. He's calling him carbon tax Carney. So just like Trump using names and attaching these nicknames. So what the thing is that regardless of how the person in power is actually doing, that doesn't matter compared to the lies, disinformation, and propaganda of the other side.
Now, on that same note, though, while yes, facts may be facts, I'm not arguing with facts. I'm not going to say alternative facts or fake facts. I'm not playing that game. But does perception have
Absolutely.
a factor in this? Because yes, by all accounts, the economy, especially in America, has done better under Biden than it did under Trump. I mean, a lot of people will disagree with that, but if you look at the hard numbers, Biden hasn't done a bad job. But if you're in the grocery store, you're a single mom, three kids, and you can't afford to buy milk, bread, and eggs, you don't care in that moment about your right to choose or democracy or maybe you do care, but it's not the top of your list because right now I have hungry mouths to feed and I can't afford to do it. And you're looking at the guy who's in charge saying, how come I can't afford it? Now, maybe these are factors beyond his control or anyone's
Absolutely.
control because here's the thing, inflation and prices being high, yes, they're connected, but inflation comes down,
And the prices are still up here
it
or moving up. And that
exactly.
is, not to like really push our name here, but that can be a part of God's angry men, right? We're looking at very elite, very wealthy individuals who own the grocery stores, who own the pricing, who make these decisions about what those prices are going to be. So regardless of what a government may do, then the company, I mean, here in Canada, Galen Weston is famous
Mhm.
for the bread situation where he was overcharging bread and had to pay back Canadians. This week, something came out that the meat that they've
Yeah,
weighed in the thing isn't actually what's in there. So he's ripping people off. And as much as, you know, inflation comes down or something else happens, they're having the highest profits they've ever had. They're not going to let that go because
of
it's
course
helping their
not.
bank account, regardless of us. So I think that when we think these ideas and, harsh life lesson to learn, Donald Trump in his platform was like, I'm going to reduce the cost of eggs, I promise. And now he's like, I can't control that, but let's take over Canada and the Panama Canal and Greenland. So let's just look at these ridiculous ideas, which could come to some fruition because, if you think about my conspiracy theorists and some of the ideas, some of these things could come to fruition. Please do not take over Canada because we do not want to be Americans. But
Oh, say, can you see?
oh dear God, no. But we need to realize that, this is not something, during the election campaign with Kamala, where she said, I am going to do something so we have stop the price gouging, right? And everyone was like, well, if you can do that as vice president, why don't you do it now? Because it can't happen unless you go through a lot of process. Donald Trump was like, day one. And now he's like, screw it. I'm going to take over Panama Canal. Eggs are going up because now there's the avian flu, right? So I think that perceptions, and we all have perceptions,
Of course.
absolutely, of the life we live that is not a very rich individual, but we also have to realize the propaganda and the things that we hear because for the last, since the convoys, there are fuck Trudeau things everywhere.
Oh, everywhere. Everywhere you go, you'll see somebody waving the flag in the back of a truck. It's usually a truck.
A
Um,
black one, a black one.
a black pickup truck barreling down the highway, flag waving, F Trudeau, fuck Trudeau, as you said it. Why not? This is not
Mm.
on, regular television here. We can say that. I'm sorry for any children who are watching. Yeah, they'll learn the word one day. Um, what's going to happen to all those flags? What are people going to do?
Well, they're gonna be like kind of like all the Biden ones, right? Or fuck Brandon or whatever it was. Let's go Brandon. Those ones are gonna become useless. I think that, that it's it's the media that we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with Ben Shapiro. We're dealing with, Elon Musk. We're dealing with, not so much Candace Owens, although she has a good one coming out next week, which we'll have to talk about in the next podcast.
Hmm.
Um, But those type of individuals, the Brett Coopers, the Jordan Petersons, those individuals really push a narrative that's very cohesive. And when you have religious leaders, especially, I mean, Canada's not immune. We have the Liberty Coalition of Canada, we have Artur Pawlowski, but they have a larger sort of base of people who connect their religion to these ideas. And that is very mobilizing, which can lead to extremism and fear and conspiracy theories. And that is, I mean, we're in North America, but that's not a purely North American thing. I think
Hmm.
it is a global thing, which is we will have to address.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think part of this too is when you talk about these figures too, um, it shows you who has the influence and who doesn't. I mean,
Hmm.
let's look at again, most recent election was the American election. You had almost every major celebrity come out in support for Kamala Harris. You had Taylor Swift when you and I were there together
Yep,
watching the
it
night she came
happened.
out, and you and I thought, "Oh wow, she's done it." And most people that night were thinking Taylor Swift, one of the most popular, if not the most popular music star on the planet right now, endorses her. That's it, game over. It wasn't game
It
over.
wasn't
I
game
don't think
over.
it moved the needle at all because people are tired of listening to celebrities, billionaires, depending which side of the aisle you're on.
But
Um,
the people that they're listening to are celebrities and
but
billionaires.
but here's the thing. It's in a different sense though, and I'll explain what I mean by that. You have these elitist, as they're called,
Yeah,
celebrities, Oprah, Julia Roberts, George Clooney, who's well known.
you're aging yourself.
I am aging myself, but I like these people. I mean, I watch their movies. I grew up with older movies, but you have Taylor Swift, you have
Beyonce,
Beyonce, who all came out in support of Kamala
Kamala.
Harris. Thank you. Almost forgot her name there for a
I got
second.
you.
But they weren't telling people how she's going to fix their daily issues. They were giving the whole your rights, your democracy, the sanctity of the presidency, our place in the world. You had people like Elon Musk coming out there saying things like free speech,
Yeah.
lowering prices, economy. He was talking with your pocketbook. They were talking with your values. And I hate to say this, but if I have to weigh both of them, my pocketbook is probably going to win because that's what's going to affect your day-to-day life immediately. And I'm not saying
Yeah,
that's right because
I'm
it's
not saying
not.
it's right. I mean, ethically, it's definitely questionable.
It's very questionable, but that's the thing there. You've noticed the shift. The celebrities don't have that same influence that perhaps they once did. There was a time when politicians were clamoring to get someone to endorse them. Like, oh my God, can you say my name in one of your concerts and all those people will support me? Now it's like, yeah, don't mention me.
Yeah, but we see that shift, right? It's more of, okay, I'm nerding out full on. But we see the shift. Okay. So when it is a celebrity, so if we're thinking
Mm.
about the good old days, if it was Tony Curtis or Frank Sinatra who said the name of a
Old Blue
politician, that
Eyes,
would that would be like
Gene
this
Martin.
amazing thing, right? But they were someone that was idolized, right? An untouchable kind of idea. But things have shifted where there are these parasocial relationships, right? So I might watch Joe Rogan, but I'm also going to see the bloopers of Joe Rogan, or I'm also going to see a connection to him. It's more instantaneous, and he puts up pictures of his life that isn't just in Life or Time magazine, right? It's on the social media. So we have this connection with them, right? This
Hmm.
relationship that's one-sided, absolutely, but they really foster this relationship with us. Ben Shapiro does it, right? So if you think about Ben Shapiro, watches woke on TikTok or watches this, people watch it because he's just being like what we are when we're watching stuff on Instagram. We're being snarky, we're being sarcastic, we're being all these things. I mean, but granted, his is only towards one group of individuals,
Yeah,
but
we
right,
attack
we're
and hate
equal
everyone equally.
opportunity. But I think that, there's that parasocial relationship that occurs there that Ben Shapiro is not poor.
No,
What's happening is not really affecting his bank account too
no.
much. And, if we think about Brett Cooper or we think about Jordan Peterson, I mean, Jordan Peterson's hanging out in Mar-a-Lago as we speak right now with Danielle Smith. You were showing me the pictures before we recorded this.
Yeah, the Premier of Alberta, and with Kevin O'Leary, a either respected or hated businessman, depending on which way you look at it.
They're not feeling the harm, yet
No,
they're the ones speaking, saying, well, let's place the blame on immigrants. Let's place the blame on the liberals. Let's place the blame on the woke. Let's place the blame on feminists. Let's place the blame on LGBTQ2SA. But they don't really care because their lives aren't affected. Whatever happens, they're going to make more money out of all of
of
this, right?
course.
More fame, more everything. That's not going to stop for them. And so I think that when people say, I'm pissed off or I'm not interested in what Taylor Swift or Beyonce has to say or what Lady Gaga has to say, zero interest. At the same time, you're like, ooh, James Wood said this, or Scott Baio said this is the best thing ever, or Kid
Scott
Rock.
Baio, Dan Rock, you're really digging deep here.
Well, oh, okay, what's his name? Tom McDonald. Let's go the contemporary
Oh
rap star
yeah.
for the right. But
Oh
like
jeez.
James Wood is huge on the right, right?
Oh, he
So,
is.
and so they
I
engage
do
in
like his
this.
acting, but yeah.
But they are like, well, we care what those celebrities say, or the people that we made celebrities, like Ben Shapiro or Joe Rogan or these other people. So it's sort of this double-edged sword where it's like, I want, I don't want. And who do we have to interpret it? Quite honestly, Kyle will admit to this. I love me some Beyonce. Like Beyonce is
Mhm.
probably one of my favorite performers ever. I don't really want to hear her political outlook. Like I really don't because I feel like she's amazing at what she does and
Yeah.
she can bring a perspective that I do not have, but it is not a perspective of me working and living in two cities,
Yes.
having no money and trying to make biscuit money for my dog.
But that but that's a good point because you know what? I can't relate to their lifestyle. I can't relate to someone like Beyonce or George Clooney or, you know,
James Woods.
James Wood even. I can't relate to these people because yes, I love their acting, I love their singing, etc. They're talented people. Yeah, good for you. But there is a very good chance that regardless of how an election turns out, nothing is going to change for you. You're still going to have money in your pocket, the house over your head. You are going to walk into a grocery store in wherever you are, buy whatever it is you need. You're going to walk into a department store, buy whatever it is you need, pay all your bills, fill your gas tank. It is not going to be something you think about, whereas most people, they have to budget, they have to be concerned
Yep.
because their bank account is not this infinite pool of money. It has a limit, and once they reach it, then panic sets in, then the dread and
Absolutely.
worry set in. So,
And also,
relating to that is very difficult, and that's I think the problem. Celebrities, when they do endorse a politician, people are sick and tired of hearing this very rich, very powerful person, in terms of being a celebrity. Tell me how I'm supposed to vote. Your life and my life are two very different lives.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, I'm going to go off on two prongs here,
Mhm.
is the fact that I'm not attacking Beyonce. God knows she is my favorite. But if Beyonce got pregnant and needed to have an abortion, it is nothing for her to snap her fingers, take her private jet, and go to a state or a country where she can have that done.
Correct.
Whereas somebody who's in small town Saskatchewan, if this right gets taken away, is not going to be able to get to BC to get the medical care that they need to have that done.
Well,
And then we have to think about the idea of like, if it takes away rights from someone who is of color, a person of color, well, again, those individuals have the means to leave and not have to
mhm,
deal with it, whereas the people here have to deal with it. And when we think about those rights that can be taken away, those are rights that they can acquire wherever they want to go. They don't have to live that life. And that is something that you're not going to take as serious when they say it. But then when we flip that, Ben Shapiro, all of them go to university campuses and talk to university
mhm.
students. A lot of them were going into the lineups on election day in America and handing out stuff and engaging with stuff. So they make themselves more I'm of the people, even though they've got a gazillion million dollars. They're actually out there.
Yeah.
Beyonce is never, or Taylor Swift is never going to come to my university campus where I teach and be like, do you just want to have a conversation about this?
No,
That's not going to happen.
it's almost that the support is performative. I'm
Yes.
going to do a concert for you. It's publicity for me. My music will go through the roof. Everyone's going to stream my music, play my music, buy tickets to my concerts. But that is where I end it. Social media, a few appearances at major events. Oh, you mean actual knocking on doors, handing out pamphlets, going to those campuses? God, no. I'm rich, famous, and have 20 Grammys. The hell I'm doing that for?
Exactly. And we see these individuals, and the way that they became famous was online from obscurity, right?
Mhm.
So they know how to market themselves. They already have their audience, they already have that engagement. Whereas an audience for Beyonce is going to the concert, waiting for something to drop, going to Tidal, going there and engaging with it that way, or doing the Eras tour with Taylor Swift. It's not that sort of same kind of thing. Even though we engage with them on social media, it's not the daily, constant radio show, TikTok show, Daily Wire show. And when Beyonce puts out a song, and I'm sorry I'm picking on Beyonce, let's pick on Taylor Swift for 5 minutes. When Taylor Swift really drops a song at midnight, everyone's excited and they want to go listen to it and they want to be a part of it. And then we'll talk about it and be like, this is a great song, and just start playing it in our headphones and no one knows we're engaging with it. When something from like the Daily Wire puts out What is a Woman or Am I a Racist as a film, they get attention from their audience who go, well, I want to watch this because it matches my bias of information and my prejudice. But they also get it from the left, who then go to mainstream media like New York Times or CNN or MSNBC and blow up and say, well, look, this is totally racist, totally sexist, totally LGBTQ, homophobic, horrible thing. And so they're getting triple of the eyes, audience, and everything, where Beyonce just already has her audience, and so does Taylor,
Because
right?
wasn't there that saying about like all press is good press to some degree? Like
Absolutely.
even the bad
Good
press can
publicity
be
is good
good.
pubs.
That's right. But there's also this phenomenon in America, in Canada, in society too, where we build these people up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are self-made billionaires, very successful, came from nothing. Now they're something. Others had some help along the way,
A lot of help, most
a
of them.
lot of
Sorry.
help. But let's just say someone like, take Oprah, for example. Oprah Winfrey, we all know her story. Grew up very poor, got a job working for a news station, I think in Illinois, somewhere in Chicago. Took a show that was bottom of the ratings, turned it to this phenomenon that became the Oprah Winfrey Show. And she was perhaps one of, if not the most influential woman in America for over 25 years
Absolutely.
and still holds a lot of influence. She became the first, what, female billionaire or self-made billionaire?
I'm not positive
I'm
on
not
that.
100% on there, but she became a billionaire. Okay, billions at that point doesn't matter. Now she is vilified by both people on the left and the right because of that influence, because she'll tell you what she thinks or how to do it. And sure, maybe it is to her benefit because if you do a certain thing a certain way, it will in the long run benefit her. Maybe, I don't know. Look at people like Mark Zuckerberg. He was this Silicon Valley dream whiz kid who co-founded Facebook.
to rate women's faces. Sorry, I just have to add that since he's not been mentioning that in his interviews as of late.
But it became the most popular social media platform. He became a billionaire, became loved by many people. And then all of a sudden, now he's this villain who's being hauled in front of Congress to ask questions about things from privacy to censorship and whatnot. I'm not saying that's not appropriate or deserved, but it seemed, or Jeff Bezos even, this is the man who founded Amazon in what, his garage or his apartment? I mean, now look at him, one of the richest men in the world, the largest retailer in the world.
Silencing the Washington Post.
Yeah, of
I
course.
mean, I think that this vilification is interesting because I think that also shows their growth in wealth, right?
Hmm.
So Mark Zuckerberg was on, which I also watch, on the Joe Rogan show the other day, and they talked about masculinity constantly and how there needs to be more masculinity in corporations, and men need to be more powerful and aggressive and all of this stuff. But what they weren't talking about, maybe for like 20 minutes, they talked about the changes in moderation. And so, I think it started off as a sexist thing to rate the faces of women at their campus university, and then other university campuses became something that was a public forum where everyone was joining and was like this great, amazing thing. Zuckerberg got richer and richer and richer. Then he got hauled in front of the Congress to deal with this stuff. Now he has somebody in power that's like, man, do whatever you want. You got the power. If you help me, I help you. And so now he's like, yeah, women can be household objects. We can insult people's mental health and say, derogatory terms if you're LGBTQ. Like it's just this thing that the more power and money you have, the more power you want.
Of
And
course.
that is the next level of power, right? If you have the voice of the president of the United States, you have a very powerful ally and you are very coarse. I mean, everyone's calling Elon Musk the president now.
Well, I mean, Elon Musk, richest man in the world, he, owns Tesla. He owns what? Skylink.
Skylink, yeah.
Thank you.
Or
The
Starlink.
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 I was gonna say Skynet for a second. Wouldn't that be fun? The rocket company for space
Yeah.
exploration,
No, it's got
no,
an X in it, doesn't it?
like
Uh,
SpaceX or
SpaceX, yeah.
so he owns these companies, and good for him. He saw opportunities, he took them. Now he has hundreds of billions of dollars, which he's using to influence everything he wants. Maybe he's the puppet master behind Donald Trump, who's just the figurehead. I don't know. I'm not going to dive into that conspiracy. That's more your job than mine. But what I'm saying here is he has seen the opportunity. He wrote the check. He's taking full advantage of it. Now, how long does that influence last? If there's anything about Donald Trump we have learned over the past, 10 years since he came down that escalator in Trump Tower, is that he will grow tired of somebody quick. The moment they become more popular than him, or they start taking away from the camera, or the the focus,
I would agree
he
with that.
tends to get rid of them. Now, will that happen with Elon Musk? I don't know because Elon Musk is not any normal influencer. This
Exactly.
guy does have a lot more compared to others.
You brought in Alon, you brought in Mark Zuckerberg and and Jeff Bezos, the means of all of the media, right? Newspaper, radio, social media.
Well, didn't
So
that
when you have that power, you're not going to let them because if they come together against you, you're buggered.
Well, that's it. I mean, think of it this way. Didn't that cartoonist leave the
Yeah,
Washington Post
because they
owned by
refuse to put it up. Yeah.
That's right. And it showed, if you haven't seen the cartoon, look it up. It shows Elon Musk, it shows Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg.
I believe Mickey Mouse is in there
Yeah.
representing the Disney company, and Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, all bowing down to Trump.
Offering him a gift of money.
Exactly. They've all donated money to his inauguration committee, millions of dollars there. And fine, I guess you want to curry favor with the new president because, like it or not, his administration will make
Hmm.
decisions that affect your company. When you're the CEO of a company, you're one of your biggest obligations is your shareholders. How do I make them more money? How do I keep them happy? If the government's going to say no to this plan because I pissed off the president, how do I fix that? I'm not saying that these men agree with his views 100% because I don't know if they do. I've never had that conversation with them. And from what we've seen in the past when they opposed Trump and what he did, obviously there's flip-flopping, but I think that flip-flop has more to do with power, influence, and money than it does your actual beliefs. But these are all conversations that we're going to have on this podcast and more. We're going to talk about the conspiracies. We're going to talk about the politics. We're going to talk about
Religion.
religion and how it all influences society. We're going to have guests that are going to come on and provide us their perspectives, guests from all walks of life, politics, everyday people, religion, you name it. We are hoping to do some live shows as well so that you, the audience, can send us your questions, give us your comments, things we look forward to reading and touching base with. We also want to connect with you. I mean, audience is important. Maybe
That
we
is.
can, sorry?
It is. So
Oh,
we have created social media platforms for this podcast. So we will have a website up soon, but we're on social media like Instagram, X, um, Facebook, Instagram,
said that already.
sorry, Blue Sky, and Rumble. We're going to go into the other
Mm.
side. So hopefully, what we want to do is look at the first 100 days of Trump, how it can affect here in Canada, Polyev and our election in 2025, plus the governments of Germany and the UK that Elon Musk is very much involved in.
France.
So we are looking forward to having our debates and our arguments and learning from each other and from you as well.
Find that middle ground that seems to be lost, and hopefully we can all walk away from each episode having learned a little bit about the other side. But for now, we thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Our next episode will be up soon. More on that on our social media. But for now, thank you for joining us. Have a great
Thanks.
night.